Okay, hello everybody. Tim Warner here. I'm in Paris, Kentucky, actually Cane Ridge, which is just outside of Paris. And I am visiting the Cane Ridge Meeting House, which was where Barton Stone first was pastor of this church. It was a Presbyterian church. Now the building you see around you here is a stone structure that was built in the 1950s to preserve the original log meeting house. I'm just going to give you an idea. This is the stone building that surrounds it. And here we have the original meeting house. This thing was built. The log meeting house was built in 17, I think it was 80 something. The structure around it, the stone building around it, was built in the 1950s. This thing is absolutely amazing. We'll go inside in a minute. What a wonderful piece of history. And for those of you who aren't aware, the Cane Ridge revival took place, led by Barton Stone, right here on this property. Stone, as the pastor of this little church, which was Presbyterian at the time, he got a hold of other ministers of other churches, Baptist, Presbyterian, Methodist, maybe some Lutherans, not sure, and announced that they were going to have a combined communion service here. And so they invited their congregations to come. Well, people came from all over, and they came by the thousands. And they had a camp meeting on this property. It's called the Cane Ridge Revival, and God really poured out His Spirit at this place. Now, of course, most of the crowds were outside, and there were various ministers who were preaching to the crowds on stumps and wagons and whatnot. But they had many, many conversions to Christ. It was, you might say, that this place is the location of the sort of Pentecost of the Second Great Awakening. This was where it started. Here's a picture of Barton Stone, who was the pastor at the time of this little church. Stone was not a Trinitarian. And of course that didn't sit well with a lot of others, but Stone was very, very much committed to the unity of all God's people around the Bible, alone as the creed, as being called only Christians and not denominational names. No creed but the Bible was their slogan. Here's the podium, there's the Bible. That's a very old King James Version. That's obviously not the one that Stone preached from. These pews in here are not original. What they had originally were just wood hand-carved benches with no backs. Pretty amazing. The black worshipers sat in the balcony up above, and the white worshipers were in the bottom. Of course, this is before the Civil War. So it's interesting that the entrance for the blacks was through stairs on the outside of the building, which aren't there anymore, to go up into those little doorways. There's two, so that the blacks wouldn't come in through the main door and come into the area that was set aside for the white worshipers. But what's remarkable about this church is the fact that they had both black and white. I would say members, but they didn't have an official membership. They believed all Christians should worship together regardless of creed or denomination. Let's go up in the balcony, have a look around. These steps were added later in the 1800s, I believe after the Civil War, when the congregation, I think, was mixed, and they didn't segregate the blacks and the whites anymore. Of course, Stone himself died in 1844, before the Civil War. So Barton Stone, around this time, the very early 1800s, led this movement to not divide by denomination, and they called it the Christian Connection. And there were many, many churches that were involved in this. There were many, many converts. Many new churches were established. It's really very remarkable. God poured out his Spirit here in some pretty amazing ways. It's interesting that when these revivals broke out, it was because of the push for repentance and unity. Ephesians chapter 4 talks about preserving the unity of the Spirit and the bond of peace. And Paul says that we are to strive for that. That was Stone's message. And as a non-Trinitarian, he had a lot of pushback from the different denominations. But it didn't deter him, and it didn't deter God's Spirit from moving and working through this very great man. Well, let's go take a look outside at the graveyard. Keep falling down these stairs. They're very steep. Now it's very windy outside, so I'm not sure how my voice is going to carry, or whether you're going to get a lot of noise in the microphone. Probably will. If so, I apologize for that. All right, there are a lot of old graves here. I'm not going to go around and look at all of them, but I just wanted to point a couple of them out. Barton Stone himself is not buried on this property. He established other churches later, but some of his family members are buried here. For example, we have here you can read that. There's a Thomas Stone. Born 1807, died 1863, and then apparently his wife, looks like Belinda Stone, died 1865. And this is an interesting one here. There's a grave marker here, which is a memorial to the members of Cane Ridge who were black. And this is a memorial to one man in particular, Samuel Bonaparte. His nickname was Bone. He was sold as a slave, or purchased as a slave in 1822, and he died in 1900. But he was a regular worshiper here at this church, along with many other blacks. There are many graves here, very old. I want to just point out, there's a monument here for Barton Stone himself, even though he's not actually buried here, but a lot of his family is. There's this big monument here. This is Barton Stone, minister of the Gospel of Christ and the distinguished reformers of the 19th century. He was born December 24, 1772, and he died November 9th, 1844. It's interesting, he died the very same year as the so-called Great Disappointment of the Millerites, the Adventists, who were predicting the second coming of Christ in 1843 and 1844, and that failed to materialize. That was when Stone himself passed away. This is another memorial to Stone. I feel like I'm on holy ground here. Anyway, well, I hope those of you watching this appreciate it as much as I do. I was a pastor of a Christian church, which was part of the movement that Stone started, the Christian Connection. And the Christian church I pastored was an outgrowth of that movement. So there's a lot of history there. I think we're going to see another revival where God's Spirit is poured out like it was here, with thousands of people coming from miles around. It's going to come for the same reason. Not because we beat our doctrinal drum and try to segregate ourselves from all other Christians who don't agree with us, but because of a push for unity of all God's people, all those whom God calls His children, regardless of denomination or creed. Those who just want to worship God and have the Bible as their creed and just want to be called Christians only. Anyway, hope you enjoyed that. God bless.